Hello, welcome to this demo of the Food Policy Impact Tool, name TBD. But the idea behind this tool is that it's an AI assisted, evidence based food policy equity analysis tool. So initially it is a chatbot interface, and the first step you do is input an early stage policy idea. So for example, I've input this one about price caps. And just a note here, I'm going to run you through a pre-completed analysis because it does take around 15 minutes for the full analysis to run end to end, and you'll see why there's a lot of different steps in it. But on the other hand, there's a lot of intermediate outputs as well, so you can sort of interact with it as it's processing. But yeah, so the first step is to input the initial policy idea, and then the chatbot will ask you some probing questions to help you refine what that policy looks like. And this is just to get it to a sufficient level of detail so that the subsequent steps of the analysis have enough to work on to do their part of the analysis. And so you can see here, it's asked me to define a few different aspects of the policy, and it's used that to update this document here. And this updates as the conversation is going on. So like all of these questions would have been open questions initially. But I answered those, and it's basically said that it feels like that's a good level of detail, so it doesn't probe me too much further than that. If I personally wanted to develop the policy further, I could ask it to ask me more questions, because this chatbot has been prompted in such a way that it does ask quite probing questions to help you think about those different aspects of it. But in this case, I haven't. I've decided to go to the next step of analysis. And that next step is a population relevance assessment. So based off of that policy that's been defined, this is a step where an AI goes through different characteristics that you can think about when breaking down a population into different subgroups. So you can see we've got this taxonomy that the AHL analysts have supplied. So there's stuff around geography, lived environment, lived experience, financial situations, family characteristics, etc. And so what it'll do is it'll go through each of these characteristics individually and give each one a rating in terms of the relevance, or how likely is that type of characteristic to be impacted by this policy. And this is sort of a high level reasoning at this point. So the AI isn't using the evidence base at this stage. So yeah, it's given sort of a high level reason for each of those, just to give a quick sort of ordering on what to focus on. And when it's doing this, it will do those individual characteristic assessments, but then also once it's done that, it'll look through each the category holistically to pull out any sort of categorical patterns, and you can see it's done that for this category of characteristics here. So the next step after that is based off of those relevance rankings. It'll select groupings of those to define as the subgroups that it will use for the next steps of the analysis. So these are groups of different characteristics that are likely to be most impacted by the policy, and it gives rationale there. And you can see that that's basically shown here, and this is a sort of interactive bit. So once it's populated these, when the analysis is running, that you can sort of delete them, or you can use the chatbot to add different subgroups as well that you'd want to analyze. But once you're happy with those groupings, you can ask it to proceed to the next step of the analysis. And that is the equity impact analysis. And this is a real meat of the tool now. So what it will do here is, for each of those different subgroups it's defined, the first thing it will do is run multiple searches on the evidence base that it has access to. So what we have here is a pre-curated evidence base that the AHL analysts have put together, various food industry reports looking at different demographics and lived experiences. And so it'll do targeted searches, which will pull out the segments of those reports that are most relevant to the query being asked, and it'll use that to gather evidence in order to answer the various aspects of this output subgroup level. So it's answering things like, who's impacted, how, benefits and harms, potential harms, etc., etc. And when it's producing this, it is required to label each statement that it makes. As you can see here, we've got evidence label. So this is when it's pulled the statement directly from a piece of evidence. And whenever it does this, you can click on it. You can see here it's quoted an exact section of the evidence base of the document that's referencing. And I've output this in two ways. So this is the model's explanation. So this is the AI's read quote. And then this is the raw data that was pulled using the tool. So this is before the AI interacts with it. And this is just for sort of auditability and visibility and, being able to check the AI's homework, because there is always a slight possibility that AIs can hallucinate citations or quotes. And so this is just a bit for peace of mind to say, okay, what it's claiming, it's quoting, it actually matches what's actually in the text, essentially. You can also from here click through to see more details about the document that's being quoted in the evidence base, and of course go through to the original source as well. So that's one type of labeling. The other type of labeling is analogical. So this is when it uses a quote from a document, but also acknowledges that it's not directly related or relevant. So it might be different context factors, and it lays them out in the explanation there. And again, it gives a quote. The third type is reasoning. So this is a type of statement that you can be less confident in, because it's not basing this on anything that's found in the evidence base, but more so on its own internal reasoning chains. But these are just left in just to sort of round out the analysis, but highlighted in such a way that you can sort of downweight them when you're reviewing. There is a fourth type as well, and that is gap labels. And so it'll highlight also when it's tried to search for information, but it didn't really have enough to go off of on the evidence base, and it couldn't sort of confidently reason about it either. So it will create this type of output for each of the subgroups. And what it'll do is once it's done the full report, it'll create a concise summary, so you can quickly have an idea of what's contained before reading through, and also create a one-liner. What's the main takeaway from each of these? You can see that here as well. And so it'll go through each of the different subgroups and do that same analysis. And then it'll move on to the synthesis stage. And this is when it's looking across all of these different reports and trying to draw out what are the common themes between them. And so this synthesis consists of a few different outputs. So the first is the equity assessment. So this is a sort of high-level overview of the different equity assessments that have been done at the individual subgroup level. So who benefits most, who benefits least, unintended effects, etc. And the labeling here is done slightly differently. So because this is a sort of meta-analysis that builds on top of the previous analysis, it references which of the subgroup analyses that's drawing this information from. And when it's synthesizing information, it's taking the original labels into account, so like the evidence versus the analogical versus the claims or reasoning, sorry. And so when it's synthesizing the findings, it puts much more emphasis on finding cross-cutting themes that are based on evidence, or if not analogical, and less so on reasoning type claims. The next section is risk and provocation. So a big part of this is the evidence gap. So it'll highlight some of the common evidence gaps that arose from the analysis and sort of common risks or tensions that also came up. And finally, based on all of that, it will give you some suggestions on how to improve the policy. So I was suggesting things like co-designing the basket or thinking about the retailer scope, etc. And this is all based off of the themes that have come out from those literature analyses in the subgroup analysis. And then finally, it'll produce an overview of the analysis methodology. So what it's done, what sources it's used, what it's looked at essentially. And that is it so far. If you want to see more detail on how it works, there's a little sidebar here that goes into a bit more detail. So right now, that's the end of it. The idea we had, and we haven't got a chance to build this in at the moment, is that this should be a sort of an iterative tool. And so once it gets to this design improvement stage, you can sort of deliberate with it more. And you can at the moment, you can deliberate with this. But ideally, what you should be able to do is deliberate with it so in a way that it updates the actual original policy specification. And once you get that to a level that you're happy with, what would happen is it would start a new session with this already populated with the design improvements. And then you can essentially run through the whole analysis again with this more fleshed out policy to see how much better or potentially worse it does. That's the tool. Massive shout out to the whole team that worked on this. This in no way was just my creation. There was a big group of us, multidisciplinary. I'm not going to shout out everyone on this. I'll tag people in the message. But loads of us. It was really fun experiment day. And looking forward to the next one.